Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am announcer Choi Song-hee for the session. From now on, we're going to start the session titled Convergence of Science and Diplomacy, Future Direction of Science and Technology Diplomacy in Korea. I'd like to introduce Professor Kim Seung-hwan, the moderator of the session. He is the professor of the Department of Physics at STEC University. He is leading the Park Tae-jun Future Strategy Research Institute. He received a PhD of Physics from Pennsylvania University and served as researchers at Math Science Research Institute of Cornell University and Advanced Research Institute of Princeton University. And then he came to serve as professor at STEC from 1990. He also served as the chairperson of the Korea Association of Physics Studies, and he also served as the Secretary General and Director of Asia Pacific Theoretical Physics Center. And as such, he has made great contribution to the academic exchanges across Asia Pacific region and served as the chairperson of Korea's representative Science and Technology Diplomacy Club in FMSTAN. Then I'd like to ask Professor Kim Seung-hwan to take the floor. This is Kim Seung-hwan, the moderator of the session. Recently, we had Korea-US Summit and G7 Summit, and those summits helped us realize the enhanced status of Korea in the world, especially in science and technology sector. Korea achieved dramatic growth. At the same time, Korea also achieved significant economic growth. And I really feel that Korea has become one of the most advanced countries in the world. And in this timing, we need to think about the cross-border and cross-sectional issue of convergence of science and technology and diplomacy, especially regarding space technologies, AI, ICT, quantum computing, blockchain, and carbon neutrality, and many other high-tech industry sectors could make great contribution to the diplomatic achievements. So the role of science technology diplomacy is being emphasized across the world. The former UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, also mentioned that the power of science and technology in the stage of diplomacy is very powerful these days. And as for climate change and other issues of non-traditional security, we cannot respond to those issues with traditional governance and diplomatic procedures. That is why it is important to share and apply science and technology knowledge. And in this sector, we have invited experts from home and abroad to look at the advanced countries' strategies of science technology diplomacy and seek the direction for Korea's science technology diplomacy. We have Mr. Lee Sang-min, a member of National Assembly, to give congratulatory remarks. Thank you very much for your presence despite your busy schedule. Mr. Lee Sang-min is the 5th elected member of National Assembly, and his constituency is in Daejeon City. He is now a member of Foreign Affairs Unification Committee, and he is also the co-chair of the Forum on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In the area of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Science Technology Diplomacy, he has been making active activities. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Nice to meet with you all. Today, I would like to congratulate the hosting of Jejuporam. And this session is about convergence of science and diplomacy. And regarding science technology, we can talk about the possibility of convergence of science and diplomacy as a follow-up measure to enhancing the achievements from the Korea-US summit. While coming here on airplane, actually I came here in 10 years ago, I was in Jeju, and today, while coming to Jeju, I received a call from Mr. Song Young-gil, the representative of our political party, and the representative of the party called me, "What are you doing and where are you? I need you right now in Seoul." That's the call I received as soon as I arrived in Jeju, but I couldn't respond to my political party representative's call. But still, the convergence of science, technology, and diplomacy is a very important topic, and today's session is very important. So we need to secure global leadership in utilizing our science and technology. But the Republic of Korea has achieved significant growth that is being envied by many other countries. And as you have seen from the Korea-US summit talks, Korea is at a status to actively respond to the challenges, global challenges faced by the humanity, not just the local issues. We need to move beyond the narrow perspective focused on only the Korean Peninsula, but we need to widen our perspective. And whether it be the COVID virus or energy or climate change, or whether it be aerospace and exploration, there are many challenges faced by humanities, and the science and technology could be the fundamental solution to those challenges, and Korea needs to enhance its capability in those sectors. To do that, we need to cooperate with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and ICT. And President Moon, I'm not sure whether the cooperation is being done well. You served as the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Science and ICT, so I'd like to ask you to facilitate the cooperation between science and technology sector with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we need to exert such leadership so that our science technology sector could grow further. And at the National Assembly's Committee of Foreign Affairs and Unification, I will also fulfill my duties and play my role in delivering this message to other public servants so that we could increase cooperation between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and ICT. So you're here in Jeju. I hope every one of you will enjoy great time in Jeju, not just studying here, and enjoy the sunlight as well tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presence here in the session. Mr. Lee Sang-min mentioned that Korea can play an important role in solving the global challenges by using the science technologies, and also asked for further cooperation between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and ICT. I would like to invite the President of STEP, Moon Mi-ok.
잠깐 문미옥 원장.
I will introduce Moon Mi-ok. She is in charge of the science and technology policy in Korea. She is a female leader, and she, before becoming the president of the STPI, she worked as a vice minister of Ministry of Science and ICT of the Republic of Korea, and as a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, she worked very hard. And while she was teaching at Wei-Hua Women's University, she was a researcher of IP, like WISE Center, Ewha Women's University. She put a lot of efforts in developing a science sector in Korea. Welcome. Hello. I'm president of Science and Technology Policy Institute. I've assigned a big assignment, and how to serve that assignments, it make me very worried. Today, in this Jeju Forum, the convergence of science and diplomacy and the future direction of science and technology diplomacy in Korea, this is kind of very special for me, and I think for me and for my colleagues, I'm really welcome to have this session. And before organizing this session, actually the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Choi Jong-moon, he worked very hard to organize this session. And also many officials of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they worked very hard to organize this. And also many the Lee Sang-min member of National Assembly showed very active support and interest in this session. And also Kim Seung-hwan, moderator. And we have the Dr. William Koglager we have here today online. And also Park Jong-wook, the Principal Research of Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute, and Oh Tae-kyun, Executive Director of Korea Energy Agency. And we have also Jang Yong-seok, Senior Research Fellow, Science and Technology Policy Institute. The science diplomacy, we started using this term just shortly, but I really appreciate that we could have very deep discussion with experts. And I worked as the Vice Minister of Ministry of Science and ICT of the Republic of Korea. While I was serving as Vice Minister, our ministry worked with very hard for promoting cooperation. In 2019, inclusive and innovative inclusive nation, to set the target and to meet the target, the ministerial cabinet meeting, that target was adopted as a official policy. And the technology competition will be worsened, and also we have under these circumstances, we have to work on developing our science and technology diplomacy. I think we have to discuss the knowledge and expertise in this. And during this session, we would come up with the strategies, and also I think we could put more efforts after this discussion. COVID-19 has prolonged since last year, and the technological competition is getting worse and fierce, and it requires us to change. And COVID-19 hit our daily lives, and almost all the sectors, including industries, and it requires us to turn to digital transition, and also we were required to promote innovation in technologies. And as you know, semiconductor, ICT, AI, and materials, we have to acquire strategic technologies, and its importance is getting grow. So in order to meet the trend, the US is changing and revising the policies, and that's what we need as well. The science and technology, and also will be very important, not only for the economic development for countries, but also for our efforts to serve some global challenges like climate change, and also resilience and maintenance. Actually, we have to think that this technology is very important. So innovative growth will need to be promoted as a national policy, and also we have to think about our roles in the global trend. In that regard, science is very important in this global society as well. Is becoming more like connected and getting complex, and developing critical and important science does not require only one country. So cooperation between countries are required in that sector. And also we have to promote solidarity among nations. So it requires kind of diplomatic strategies. That efforts will bring prosperity for the whole world. This is the background of all the diplomatic science and technology diplomacy. And science and diplomacy need to be linked. And in order to enhance performance of diplomacy, we have to make the best use of science and technology. That is the way of convergence of science and technology and diplomacy. Korea right now, our diplomacy is backed by science as well. The Chorus Summit and G7 Summit, Korea showed its heightened status on the global stage, and we were recognized with our advanced technological advancement. And based on that, we have to revisit the science and technology diplomacy, which was built 2 years ago. Infrastructure, institution, we have to review all of them. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think it opened this session to provide venue for public discussion and gathering all the experts related in the science and diplomacy and technology. I hope all of experts could share knowledge and insights. The Global Innovation Strategic Center, we have here the center leaders and the head of the center. I hope we could get the discussion in this session into the fruitful results. Assignment from Lee Sang-min, I will do my best for that. Thank you.
네,
Thank you very much for your remarks. She has mentioned comprehensively about the topic of our session. Seems like we have lots of things to talk about in the session. So we need to bear it in mind that the two ministries need to cooperate with each other under this topic. And while experiencing COVID-19, and I feel that it's very good that the two ministries started their cooperation. And in the new environment, we need to review our progress so far and make further improvement. I'd like to ask you to pay attention. Mr. Lee Sang-min came here despite very busy schedule. Seems like he's receiving a lot of calls even now, so he may have to leave here earlier. So we may take a very short break and take a commemorative photo altogether and then start the panel discussion. We'd like to take group photo, so our audience may stay still on your seat and we will take a photo together.
다시 가시면은 저희가
그 자리 정돈하는 동안에 제가 국회의원을 위한 변명
I can make an excuse for members of the National Assembly. Usually when members of National Assembly come to an event and when they leave the space earlier, then many people criticize the members of National Assembly. But I know very well about the schedule of Mr. Lee Sang-min, and making a presence in a certain event like this itself is the signal that the member of National Assembly is very much interested in the topic. So we're going to share what we have discussed today with the members of National Assembly later on.
자, 네. 그럼 지금부터
Then from now on, we're going to start discussion. First of all, I will introduce to you briefly the discussants of the session. For more details, please refer to the program booklet. The first discussant is Dr. William Coglazier. He is here with us online from the US. Would you say hello to the audience? Dr. Coglazier is a renowned expert in science and diplomacy, not only renowned in the US but also in the UN. He served as the 4th Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary of State in the US, and he also served as the co-chair of the Science Technology Innovation Group. And in AAAS, he served as the senior scholar in the and also he is the editor-in-chief of Science and Diplomacy. Second discussant is Mr. Park Jong-wook, the principal researcher from Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute. For the last 30 years, he has served as the expert in international cooperation in the area of space science. He was the representative of Korea from the COSPAR, and also we call this institute ETRI. We have Mr. Park Jong-hoon from ETRI. At ETRI, Dr. Park Jong-hoon spent about 30 years in managing a lot of R&D projects and also provided support to small and medium-sized companies in terms of intellectual property management and joint research on ICT technologies. And as a discussant in the area of carbon neutrality, we have Mr. Oh Dae-gyun, the former climate change ambassador. Dr. Oh Dae-gyun is from Korea Energy Agency. So he served as I mentioned, the climate change ambassador, and he is the member of UNFCCC CDM Executive Board represented for Asian Group. The last discussant is Mr. Chang Yong-seok, the senior researcher from Korea Science and Technology Policy Institute. He is serving as the chair of the Committee for Science and Technology Policy of OECD. Not only in OECD but also in APAC, World Bank, and IDB, he provided advisories, and he has also served as the managing editor of STI Policy Review. Today, the theme of the discussion is Convergence of Science and Diplomacy. We're going to deal with the aspects of space, ICT, carbon neutrality, and overall science, technology, diplomacy policies. In these aspects, we will discuss the trend of science, technology, diplomacy strategies of advanced countries, and how could Korea improve its mid to long-term science, technology, diplomacy strategies. And we will look back on the achievements we have made so far in this sector, and we will also discuss the implications from that. After discussion, we will have a Q&A session. The panel discussion will start, first of all, from the discussion from Dr. Colezier, Dr. Park Jong-woo, and Dr. Chang Yong-seok. Dr. Colezier, would you start your discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be with you today, and an honor. My background is as a physicist, but I spent approximately 3 decades sort of working, what you might say, in science diplomacy. And I sort of use science diplomacy as both science trying to help improve diplomatic relations and achieve diplomatic goals, and also for diplomacy helping to achieve scientific goals. And it can be accomplished by non-governmental organizations and by governmental units, but also collaborations between non-governmental science communities and governmental agencies. I spent many years at the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, which has a role of providing advice to the American government and the American people, studying many issues, a lot of them domestic, but also carrying out collaborations with scientific communities in other countries. And the purpose of these international studies was not only to try to look at and make contributions to important issues of both countries, but also to help, in the case of the United States, we were trying to help the scientific community in other countries become more important advisors to their own country. So over the years, we've carried out many studies, the National Academies did, with China, with Russia, with Japan, with science institutions in Africa, all with the purpose of trying to explore and make contributions on important issues, but also to try to help strengthen the bonds between the countries in science, technology, and innovation. And our 2 countries, the Republic of Korea and the United States, with their impressive capabilities in science, technology, and innovation, I think science diplomacy is a great asset for our countries, because other countries around the world, both advanced countries and advancing emerging countries, really want to collaborate with those that are at the very top in terms of science and technology. So I think we can use our capabilities to advance our own domestic goals, our national goals, but also to try to contribute to the larger global goals of peace and prosperity, trying to help other countries become more capable and to achieve what is now called a sustainable development goal. So I see science diplomacy as a great asset for our countries and an asset for the world. Thank you, and I will stop here and be happy to make comments later as we go through the discussion.
Dr. Colezier, he made short remarks, and he said he has been working in science and science technology diplomacy, and the U.S. has the asset of the science technology diplomacy and how to use it. He mentioned about that. Then next. Hello. I am Park Jong-woo, Principal Researcher of Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute. As Lee Sang-min and as Moon Mi-ok said, recently Korea attended the G7 summit, and we had Chorus summit as well. And by doing so, in vaccines and carbon neutrality, IT, and semiconductor, in various sectors in science, we have achieved a remarkable success and achievement. In last June, we had Chorus meeting, and we were achieving very meaningful diplomatic achievement. As reported by media, the missile agreement between Korea and the US, the limit of range of missile was lifted, and we were able to take a new step forward in terms of national defense, security, and space development. And also in terms of Korean positioning system, we were able to get support and cooperation from the US. And Artemis, the US-led manned moon exploration program. In that program, Korea has got a chance to be involved in that project officially. As you know, compared to advanced countries in space, we have been late by 30 to 40 years. In 1992, the KITS-81 was launched, and by doing so, we were able to launch our space development project in earnest. And over the last 30 years, we have been working very hard to enhance the cooperation among government, industry, and institute. And we were able to achieve various achievements in space and R&D. And in terms of budget for space development, we ranked 10th but with increasing budget. The KSLV-2 is likely to be launched October this year, and KPLO will be launched as well. Like this, various kind of satellite projects is under development and under planning. And GNSS and human exploration in that sector, we will cover various scope of space development. And also we are likely to join the 1 trillion club in terms of budget for space development. Under these circumstances, Korea is going to be the advanced nation in terms of nation in the near future. And taking this opportunity of transition in terms of space development, I think we need to seek for changes in space diplomacy. As a latecomers in space development, we focused on enhancing our capabilities in technology development. However, as becoming the advanced nations in space, I think we could use the science technology as a leverage for our diplomacy. With this advancement in science and space development, we are ushered into a new space era. Actually, before we were not able to some countries were not able to be involved in space development because of technological and human resources words. Arab Emirates, Indonesia, and Vietnam and Asian countries are joining this space development very actively.
선진국의 경우
Just like in other sectors, leaders of space industry is participating in various international organizations' activities and multilateral cooperative schemes and international cooperation programs to take the leadership role in the space sector. In the case of Japan, which is a neighboring country of Korea, it is participating in the Asia-Pacific Region Space Agency Forum to enhance its status as the leader of space development and to have more international cooperation. In the case of Korea, we need to become more active in participating in various multilateral cooperation schemes to discuss international cooperation in the sector of space industries. And we can also use the existing cooperative schemes with leaders of space industries so that we can consolidate or solidify our cooperation in the bilateral space sector and work more closely with Southeast Asian countries and Southwest Asian countries to more actively respond to this trend. And whether it be front runners or latecomers in space industry, we need to take reciprocal approach so that we can achieve diplomacy achievement for science technology and development of science technology for the diplomacy. And we need to strengthen our R&D capabilities and diplomacy capabilities in space science. Regarding bilateral cooperation with latecomers in space development, we have experience in providing ODA projects. For example, the Ministry of Science, ICT, and KARI supported Ethiopia developing space industry, and KASI has also supported Korean War veteran countries develop their space sector, and the private company Satrek I provided technology education to Arab Emirates. Based on this experience, we have the capability to have technical and political international cooperation in the sector. So the relevant government departments and academic sector and research institutions need to join hands with each other to discover the tailored international cooperation programs and set relevant policies. So it is very important for those government departments to play a role here. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Doctor, for your comments. So one of the achievements made through the Korean-US Summit is related to the topic of today's session. So Korea will soon become one of the leaders of space development industries. In the era of space industry, we need to have both competition and cooperation with many countries, so that science technology can contribute to diplomacy and diplomacy can contribute to the development of space science technology. Dr. Park Jong-hoon, nice to meet you. I am from ETRI. My name is Park Jong-hoon. These days, ETRI is famous for AI and semiconductor technology, quantum communication technology as well. And as presented yesterday, we are having mid to long-term cooperation with the US for the telecommunication technology, and ETRI will make a great contribution to that, not only in terms of technology development, but also the developed technologies need to be transferred to the partner countries. So we are transferring the technologies to other countries and Korean companies as well. For global cooperation, we conduct joint research activities with developed countries and also with underdeveloped countries or developing countries. We conduct various international organizations programs to share our knowledge and technology with them. Last year's statistics say that we conducted 50 such projects in 17 countries last year. Today, in terms of the importance of science technology diplomacy, the importance was already emphasized by the previous discussants, so I'm going to skip that part. I'd like to focus more on sustainable diplomacy, and actually I have the working level experience in developing technology, and at the field we feel some challenges and that we really want to solve. So I'd like to make a small but feasible proposal to solve the challenges that the working level people feel at the field while developing technologies. So the title of the solution is a system to discover science technology demands for strategic diplomacy. Based on science technology capability, Korea has achieved great growth, and Korea is the ICT powerhouse. Whether it be private channel or diplomatic channel, we are receiving a lot of requests to have science and technology cooperation, and there are many global science technology agendas. And if you look at those global agendas, Korea has a lot of roles to play. that is one of the sources for the demand for science technology. So the demand for science technology and cooperation is growing, but the current cooperation scheme is weak. So as time passes by, we will have to set priorities among many demands for science technology cooperation. If we secure the available R&D resources, we will have to develop the technologies based on our priority, and those items could be used for diplomacy. So we need to achieve such virtuous cycle as a strategic diplomacy for Korea. So what is the first thing we can do? Well, from diplomatic activities, we can discover the demand for science and technology development and cooperation. That's the first thing we can do. I have conducted about 10 or so global cooperation projects for science and technology development. For example, establishing pilot project or feasibility study. Common challenges are like these. When we do pilot projects, the pilot projects are completed and that's the end. There's no follow-up projects. Of course, some cases of follow-up projects could exist, but in my experience, most of the pilot projects are conducted, and when they are closed, then that's the end, no follow-ups. But that's the reality. If the international community's support or aid is over, then it's difficult for developing countries to create follow-up projects, and we have donor countries, the countries that transfer technology. If there's no money, donor countries not willing to continue transferring the technology. So then next year, a new donor country comes to the recipient country, set another strategy. So it's like we're repeating, setting plans and strategies. So if I look at the cases, they make such an excellent plans and strategies, but the issue is how they actually execute them into reality. So I'm not sure if what I'm talking about could be applied to other countries, but it's NATO phenomenon, no action, talk only. That's no action, talk only. So that's what I feel at UN activities. They developed 17 SDG goals and they prepared a roadmap to put them into practice. They're trying to secure sustainability. That's one of the reasons we need to solve these issues.
We have to think about that. Well, there are many projects. Then we are not able to conduct all the follow-up measures. And if something is very strategically important and diplomatically important, then we have to identify that project and we have to come up with some follow-up measures. And we need to set the program, break from the existing ODA project. It's not necessarily to be the donor program. And beneficiary nations need to be participating in the project. So we have to complete development technology, and it could be a project. Then we could have very trustable diplomatic activities. If we develop demand, then we could set some new target and program. And based on that program, I believe that we were able to achieve great growth over the last 50 years. The governance is establishing now, and to some extent it is complete establishment. I think we need to discuss on that issue. And what I want, personally, the science technology diplomacy, in that regards, we have to do further to lead to our actual development of technology. Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. The doctor, in terms of sustainable science diplomacy, he talked about his experiences in ODA project, and he also covered many sectors, and he said that we have to manage the demand, but there is some challenges for officials involved being in that sector. So he proposed some solutions, and he mentioned NATO, so we should not remain NATO. Dr. Oh Dae-gyun, I'm a former executive director of Korea Energy Agency. I retired and I'm taking my time. I was requested to talk about the carbon neutrality. It is not a specific sector. It is our target. And in terms of science and technology, the whole world has set some common goal for the world. It is the first case for the world to set this common goal in terms of carbon neutrality. Same target. The technology's role is important, but in terms of cooperation, we have to go forward together. In that regard, diplomacy is very important in this sector. Carbon neutrality derived from climate changes, and it was backed by the scientific research, and also climate change convention was launched. It is a matter of diplomacy. If we want to address this issue, the technology is required. And the issue raised by science, we need to set some framework based on diplomacy, and we have to apply the technology to address the issues, working with international community. Climate change is some area that we have to converge, like we have to move for, like promote convergence of science and diplomacy. The science and technology need to be transferred to the international community, and what kind of role we have to take, that is very important to make this in our decision-making process. I was supervising R&D. Our target was not developing technology. Our target was how to acquire technologies. And we said that we could get the technology from others. Then R&D is the last resort. But we cannot rob a technology. The technology should be based on the joint projects. It's rather, if I work on develop some technology by myself, it would be difficult. So we have to work together in developing technologies. So some partnership, Asia Pacific partnership, and recently mission innovations, all those projects are comprised of some advanced technologies to conduct a joint research development project. And making the use of technology and this cooperation, I think it is reasonable, and we have to strengthen cooperation. I was going to IAEA, Asia Pacific Partnership, as a representative of Korea, but they are actually many people are complaining that there are too small number of people in leading those projects. So I was involved in various projects. So I think more and more people need to have chance to excel their potential. So we have to develop some platform. In terms of technology demand, we have to have some system, and how to manage human resources needs to be also considered. And science and technology engineers, they do not have any incentive to go to other countries to promote negotiation and collaboration. And so in this diplomatic program, like to promote the science and technology diplomacy, people do not have any incentives to be involved in this sector. Climate change, actually, technology development is not only thing in climate change. In vaccine program, how to use the technology is more important. In negotiations, I participated in the vaccine program. The key was intellectual property. Developing countries want intellectual property for vaccines, but advanced nations, they said that we do not have this negotiation if you mention about intellectual property. The climate change and the vaccines and technology developments, actually advanced nations develop those technologies. And when developing countries want that technology, then the advanced nation do not want to give the technology to developing countries. Korea has many intellectual property assets. So in terms of climate change, if we want to take a role of bridge between advanced and developing countries, we have to make the best use of the intellectual property and technologies. So what kind of role we could take, that is something that we have to think about. When we have advanced and emerging technology, and what kind of role we will take in bridging advanced and developing countries. I think that is the key. That will be the key agenda in this discussion. Then carbon neutrality, rather than reducing emission, and how do we adapt to changes, is deeply related as well. And whom do we have to work with? Also, it will be another key discussion. And if the North and the South Korea, if we are in crisis of climate change, both will be hit. So usage of technology and who we will work with when we hit by climate changes, we have to work with neighboring countries, and we need collaborations between the North and the South. So that is the approach that we need to take. So carbon neutrality on the Korean Peninsula, that strategy is required as well.
결론적으로
So, in conclusion, in the midst of climate change, IPCC played an important role. Thousands of scientists gathered together and provided scientific evidence, laying out the foundation for the whole world to move forward under the common scientific ground. And Korea should have played a bigger role in this, I think. So we need to manage not only demands, but also the talents, the human workforce. We need to provide the necessary support for the talents as well, for the success of science diplomacy. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, for your comments regarding carbon neutrality and climate change issues. Many countries around the world are all stakeholders of this issue. So the talents are the key, and we are now lack of the talents. So when we talk about demand, we also need to talk about the talents. Lastly, Dr. Chang Young-seok, would you start your comments? Thank you. I'm the last person to make comments, and seems like everyone talked about all good things, so I don't have much to say. Mr. Lee Sang-min, the member of National Assembly, and many distinguished panelists mentioned all important things, so I don't have special thing to say, but this session is about convergence of science and diplomacy. I'm going to focus on diplomacy. I'd like to share several ideas. First of all, what is diplomacy? That's about dealing with relationship with foreign countries. When you deal with the relationship with foreign countries, you have to compete with them and you have to cooperate with them. When you compete with them, and when you cooperate with them, you use various means and resources. In terms of traditional diplomacy, we talk about we used military power. However, as the modern society has evolved, the importance of science technology became bigger than ever before. In this regard, science and diplomacy should come closer to each other. So that's why we need to achieve convergence of science and diplomacy, especially at this point of time. And we need to further emphasize the importance of converging science and diplomacy. From these aspects, science and diplomacy should be discussed from the directionality perspective. Because when we say science, technology, diplomacy, we think about some forms of cooperation. But before we do cooperation, the first priority is to ensure the interest of our nation. It should be in the interest of our nation, and then we can start cooperation. So in the end, science, technology, diplomacy is ultimately about ensuring the interest of your nation. Nobody can deny this, but still, we need to cooperate with other countries. Why is that? Because there are many global challenges. Many people already mentioned global challenges like climate change, emerging technologies like space technologies. These challenges cannot be dealt with by only a single country. In order to enjoy some interest, we need to cooperate with each other, and cooperation is in the interest of your nation. So this is the basis we need to take when we talk about the direction of science, technology, diplomacy. So cooperation and competition needs to be done in a harmonious way. That's the biggest basic concept when we talk about the convergence of science and diplomacy. Another aspect, when we conduct diplomacy, we can talk about multilateral cooperation and bilateral cooperation. We need to think about multilateralism. Multilateralism is very important. Of course, powerful countries can cooperate with each other, or small, weaker countries can cooperate with each other in terms of bilateral cooperation. But when we talk about multilateral cooperation, that's very important. Now it is urgent to have multilateral cooperation because we are faced with global challenges that require the actions from all countries across the world. That is why we need to conduct multilateral cooperation in the science diplomacy activities. One of the examples was mentioned by the previous speaker, ODA. Now the global gap or divide is widening. We all have to move forward. We all have to go together. But we have latecomers and underdeveloped countries that find it very hard to catch up with other advanced countries. In terms of science technology, how can we help underdeveloped or latecomers countries to enhance their science technology capacity? This is a very important point. So from this perspective, it's not just like helping underdeveloped countries under MDG goal, but we need to focus more on capacity building of underdeveloped countries or developing countries through multilateral cooperation. 2 years ago in Seoul, there was CSDP and OECD, DAC all come together and had discussion. They discussed that many countries are using ODA, and there should be more support for development of science and technology through ODA activities. That was what we discussed in the forum. So on the occasion of Seoul Forum, OECD, DOC, DAC, and CSPP had close interactions.
In 2019, the Ministry of Science and ICT and Ministry of Foreign Affairs jointly came up with a science technology diplomacy policy. It was a very historic event. The two ministries worked together. It was a very big picture, and it was recognized as a big picture. And in 2019, and it's been 2 years since then, what changes we have went through? The COVID-19. COVID-19 will make us to recognize the importance of science technology diplomacy. In that regard, I think we need to review the status. Actually, our institute made very great contributions to that achievement. Comprehensively, it was made comprehensively, and important points were covered. And what is more important is that no action is something that we have to get away from. If we set some plan, we have to implement that plan. In terms of that implementation, we have to move forward step by step. One more important point I want to deal with, it is human resources. In cooperation, human resources need to be agents. In that regard, in diplomacy and in science, the two group of people need to work together and communicate with each other. So we have to put our efforts in making them cooperate together. That make our plan and strategy to be more efficient. In that regard, implementation is important, and human resources need to be exchanged and need to be communicate one another. That is important. That's the end of my talks. Thank you. The Dr. Chung mentioned about the national interests. While we are competing, we have to work together, and it will helpful for development of science, and the importance of multilateralism and capacity building is important as well. That's what the doctor said. And the human resources exchanges in science and in diplomacy, it was emphasized by him. And the panelists had talks. And Cole Glazer, doctor, you had not that long time for your talks. So after listening to discussions of here on the studio, if you have any idea you want to talk about, do you have any idea you want to talk about?
Yeah, I learned a lot from the presentations. It reinforced, of course, the very impressive advancements and capabilities of Korea in science and technology, and how you are already using your capabilities in terms of diplomacy, both for your national interest as well as for the global interest in assisting other countries. I thought the comments, there were a number of very wise statements that were made. I was just going to emphasize briefly a couple of them because they resonate very much with me and my own perspective. In the case of space, I think that has become even more important in terms about connecting diplomacy with our assets in space. Initially, space was very much connected with exploration. Now there's very much cooperation and competition in space. And we need the diplomats and the space technologists really working very closely together, I think, and that was emphasized. In terms of AI, digital technologies, as you know, all countries of the world right now are very much concerned about the impact of these rapidly advancing emerging technologies. They can bring great opportunities for humanity, but they can also create great challenges and threats. And again, we need our diplomats and our technologists working closely together and thinking about things of how we're going to govern and make sure some of the potential threats from these technologies can be dealt with, as well as maximizing the advances that they can bring to accomplish our national and our global goals. I was also struck very much with the emphasis on trying to turn the aspirational rhetoric, for example, at the UN, the 2030 agenda into real concrete action. I think that's something both the United States and Korea can work in helping developing countries they all want to advance in terms of science and technology, and trying to help them do that, I think, can advance not only our countries, but also help to ensure peace in the world. In the case of energy technologies, as we know, climate change is one of the biggest challenges the world faces right now. And I believe that the answer is going to come primarily from advancing technologies dealing with carbon-free sources of energy. Again, having very close cooperation between the United States and Korea in helping to move the world in that direction, mission innovation. Mentioning the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that in itself was a great initiative of science diplomacy. And then the last panelist speaking about diplomacy. Diplomacy really is countries looking at their own interests, but as we know, that national interest very much converges with the global interest on the kind of issues that we're talking about. And the advanced countries, I think, can help the whole world, including the developing countries, in science and technology capacity building, talking about ODA, I think, trying to help developing countries improve their capabilities, but also increase the use of science in terms of informing their own policies and their own diplomacy. Among the topics that were only briefly touched on that I think are extremely important, of course, dealing with the pandemic, with public health issues. It's been a very 2020, let's say, a very challenging year, but science and technology is helping to, I think, rescue the world. We're going to have to move faster in getting the whole world vaccinated. We haven't talked much about some of the challenges. Yeah. For example, with China, briefly touched on North Korea. Also, very big issues that our science community has to deal with. And last thing I might mention, I think also governments encouraging their non-governmental scientific institutions to engage in science diplomacy. And sometimes what you might call the track 2 diplomacy of non-governmental institutions, coordinated with governments, can actually move things in the right direction. So anyway, let me just end to say the U.S.-Korea summit of President Moon and President Biden, I think, talked about many of these issues, and it just reinforced how important it is for our two countries to work together, because I think we share many common goals in what we're trying to achieve using science and technology.
Yes. Thank you. 네, 이제 패널
It's almost the end of panel discussion, but we will receive questions from the floor, questions to panelists or questions to Dr. Koglager. If you have any question, please raise up your hand.
네, 패널들께서
Or panelists, you may share questions and answers with each other. So please say your name and organization and ask question briefly. Good afternoon. I am from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I belong to the supporters of green diplomacy. I am a student. Thank you very much for your panel discussion. And through international research and development cooperation, we can secure advanced technology capability and solve challenges through the science diplomacy. And thank you very much for sharing your insights. My question is, the science technology diplomacy, the term has been coined not long before, and in Korea many people have low awareness on science technology diplomacy. How can we systematically develop the science technology diplomacy? And between competition and cooperation, we need to take some strategic science technology diplomacy. And what is the direction the Korean government is taking? Thank you for your question. Who will answer the question? Dr. Chang. Thank you for difficult but fundamental question. First, science technology diplomacy appeared not long ago, but it's been long since the term appeared. I began to have interest in science technology diplomacy from 2010 when I read the report from the UK Royal Society report. That's the first time I was very impressed by the term science technology diplomacy. I was impressed because science technology can become a tool of diplomacy. That's something that I didn't imagine before. So when I read the Royal Society report, I felt that I am one of the persons who conduct science technology international cooperation, and I felt that I am serving as a kind of diplomat. So it has been long since the terminology was coined, but it hasn't been long since the term was introduced to Korea. And Korean policymakers have taken interest in this terminology, but still we had the existing practices of science technology diplomacy and cooperation long before. Although the terminology was coined and its history is not very long, but already the policymakers and many people were already doing this, and they had interest in this. And the fruit of science technology diplomacy efforts is the strategic plans created jointly by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and ICT. If you look at the plan, you can see the Korean government's direction for science technology diplomacy. Many relevant institutions and departments can cooperate in various ways, and that is explained in detail by that plan. But I want to emphasize again, the science technology itself is the goal and the tool. So those who are conducting diplomacy must have deeper understanding on science technology. To do that, we need to put priority on the public servants at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs getting further understanding on science technology, and they need to have better understanding on how science technology can contribute to the mutual prosperity of many countries. And those who are in the sector of science technology needs to remember that they are doing diplomacy when they conduct international cooperation on science technology. They need to have such mindset of diplomat, and then many issues could be solved. Thank you.
Bill, do you have any more comments? Do you have more comments? 한국말로.
So do you have more comments? Would you like to make more comments? Would you like to have more comments, Mr. Colazier?
Okay,
A
yeah,
very
sure.
brief
Go ahead.
comment. I agree very,
Yeah.
very much with the last speaker that science diplomacy emphasizes that it can be used, science and technology can be used as a tool, a mechanism to accomplish our goals, but it really requires it requires the scientists and the diplomats talking and learning from each other. In the United States, we've emphasized trying to increase the capacity of people with expertise in science and technology in our foreign ministry, the U.S. State Department. I had the pleasure of serving for 3 years as the science and technology advisor to the U.S. Secretary of State. I learned from the diplomats and have learned, in fact, great respect for the real diplomats in our foreign ministry. But they also learn from interacting more with people who come with science and technology expertise. And I think there was great benefit by our working together. One of the things that has happened over the last decade is now the people who hold positions in foreign ministries that deal with science and technology now have a network called, acronym FEMSTAN, the Foreign Ministry Science and Technology Advice Network. So one thing that I might encourage the foreign ministry in the Republic of Korea to become very active in this informal network, because I think it's helped to advance sort of common goals of foreign ministries, particularly of the advanced countries, in dealing with the many challenges facing the world. But anyway, and just completing, it's really quite impressive what the Republic of Korea has done in science diplomacy in all of these aspects. And so I certainly hope that our two countries work very closely in trying to realize the potential of this tool and this asset to accomplishing our national as well as our global goals.
Thank you. 제 시간이 이제 거의 다 이제
So time's almost up. Would you like to have short comments, panel discussions?
Odegun, I have just a short comment. Technology could become a tool. But about that, like if I really wanted to be a diplomat in the oil producing nation, and now the technology will provide energy. It means that some nation with technology is some like nation. It is tantamount to the nation with oil. So making the best use of technology, we need to move forward. And technology and science and the diplomacy, how to combine the two, we have to think about that further. Thank you for your comment. I think we need to wrap up this session. COVID-19 pandemic and climate change crisis and the hegemony competition between the US and China, we are struggling to deal with all these issues, and we are taking the lead in addressing those issues. As actually the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and ICT jointly came up with some policies. So it's just 2 years since its first launch, but so at this moment we need to review the plan and policy again. And I understand that 42 embassy in other countries, they will respond to the cooperations with other countries, not only in terms of technology, but also we have to work with and to promote negotiations with other countries and collaborations with other countries. Today, we have experts and we discussed space development and climate change and policies. We need to come up with some detailed plan to develop the science technology diplomacy. The participants online, I hope you have like higher interest in this. All of discussants, panelists, and speakers and special guests here today, and online participation, thank you all for taking your time. And we will wrap up this session. Thank you. Once again, please give them a big round of applause. The Science Technology Diplomacy launching ceremony, you need to move to the hall by 3:20.